Hi everyone, and welcome back to yet another day of Cavemas here in the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem, and this video today again is a little bit different to what we would normally do. I recently watched a YouTube video by the very talented Paul Clark, and it really inspired me to do a bit of festive watercolour painting. So the painting that I have done is based loosely on the video that he did, which was a sort of step by step. I'm going to leave the link in the description to Paul's YouTube channel. He's very, very knowledgeable and he's got a good sense of humour as well. So if you're into watercolour painting, he's well worth checking out. Rather than sort of take you through what I'm doing when you could go and watch Paul's video, I decided that I am going to tell you a little festive story today. So this is a very quiet and calm video. I wouldn't say ASMR, that's a bit much, but it's meant to be relaxing and something you can maybe have on in the background while you're doing your own painting. So I really hope you enjoy this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, so feel free to leave any comments down below if you've got an opinion on this type of video. And let's get to top down view and we can get going. Blasted snow. William Langworthy peered out of his cottage window and watched the gentle flakes starting to come down in his garden. He looked further away, his eyesight starting to fail a little bit. The snow was coming down heavily over the village. William knew that if he wanted to make it to the village shop, he was going to have to leave soon. Stiff from a morning's work out on his small holding, reluctantly he creaked and bent over to pull his boots on once again. Decided it would be a good idea to put a scarf and a hat on too, just in case the snow got any heavier on his way home. William could have waited till another day to go and head out down to the village, to the store, but there was a particular reason that he had to go this specific day. His only remaining family member, a sister, who stayed several hundred miles away, always demanded a Christmas card from William. William himself had no reason to like Christmas and was often referred to as a bit of a Scrooge. He didn't see the purpose nor any reason, and it was just another day of the year. After all, even in winter, there was still work to be done out on the small holding. Things to tidy up, things to put in order, and preparing the ground once again for next year's crops. If he didn't send a Christmas card, he would never hear the end of it from his sister. So grudgingly, he pulled his hat down over his tufty grey hair and headed out the door into the gentle, light snow that had started to fall. He justified the walk down to the village as he started to leave footprints on his way down the lane. He needed milk anyway, so at least he wasn't going just for the Christmas card. He had realised that he didn't bring a pen, and he was going to have to sign the card by borrowing a pen and post it, as today was the last day that the post would reach his sister before Christmas. As he walked down the hill towards the village, a small group of children had run out in excitement, ready for the first fall of snow before Christmas, with mothers running after them, trying to put scarves and gloves on them. But the kids didn't mind. William did mind. He didn't like children. He knew quite often that the children had names for him, and they liked to call him things like Weird Willie. The village community was a friendly and tight-knit one, and a very supportive community. But nobody really had time for William, just as he didn't have time for them. He was quite happy being self-sufficient, living his modest life and making a little money from the crops that he grew on his small holding. What need did he have for children, or the parents that ran after them, or anyone else in the community? As long as the shop was open, that was all William needed. As with many rural communities, the local shop also doubled up as the post office, and the usual sing-song voice greeted William when he went through the door. "Hello, Mr. Langworthy, how are you today?" That very intonation grated on William's ears. He didn't like cheery people. He didn't see the need to be cheery, and least of all the lady that worked in the shop, who, by virtue, he had to put up with, unless he didn't want to have any milk, that is. "I need a Christmas card," he said to her. "Well, Mr. Langworthy," even though William had told her 100 times to call him William. "What kind of card are you looking for? Is it for someone special?" And as she said this, she knew full well, the same as every year, that Mr. Langworthy was buying a card for his sister. She did think to herself that had she preempted, she could have already picked one out for him to save any more unpleasant conversation, which is the way she found conversations with Mr. Langworthy. But she'd been busy with many others coming in to gather up a few essentials before the snow came in this afternoon. Well, Mr. Langworthy, if you'd just like to take a look at the stand over by the door there, we have a lovely selection of Christmas cards that you could choose from, most of which would be suitable to send to your sister. I never mentioned my sister, William snapped. He immediately thought he maybe shouldn't have snapped, but it was none of anyone's business who he was sending Christmas cards to. He trudged over to the stand and looked at the sea of red with gold foil, robins, snowmen, cuddly teddy bears. What they had to do with Christmas he did not know, nor did he really care. With fat fingers he grabbed the one closest to him, which was a beautiful winter scene depicting snow lying heavily on branches and glistening ice on a pond. "This'll do," he muttered to himself. On his way back to the counter, he went into the little fridge and pulled out a pint of milk. The bell behind him signalled the door opening and another customer coming into the store. As he pulled his wallet out of his pocket at that moment, he realised he didn't know the name of the lady behind the counter with the shrill voice that irritated him every time he entered. He then also realised that he didn't really care. "That'll be £3.40, please, Mr. Langworthy." £3.40? £3.40 for a pint of milk and a Christmas card? You have to be joking. "No, I'm afraid not, Mr. Langworthy." Grumbling and fumbling, William put the money on the counter. "Have you a pen?" he said to her. Yes, I do have a pen. Would you like to borrow it, Mr. Langworthy?" "Yes, please. I will need to get this card written and posted today." With a smile, she handed over a plain biro and looked over his shoulder to the customer behind. "How can I help you?" William grabbed the card and moved to the side of the counter so that he could write the card. No frivolities, no niceties here. "To Celia, Merry Christmas, from William." And with that, he stuffed the card into the envelope, sealed it, and began to write her address on the front of the envelope. As he came to the last line, he stopped. What was her postcode? He couldn't remember. He'd been sending cards to Celia every year on her birthday and Christmas for at least 20 years, and she'd lived in the same house all of that time. And here was William, snow coming down outside, and he couldn't remember her postcode. He sat the pen down, put the card in his pocket, and turned to walk away. "Mr. Langworthy, didn't you want to post that card?" "I'll post it when I'm ready." He stalked out the shop and slammed the door behind him. The young woman who had come into the shop looked at the lady behind the counter, whose name was Ethel, by the way. What's gotten into him? Does he not have any Christmas spirit at all? Ethel gave her a knowing look. Men like Mr. Langworthy have never had any Christmas spirit, and nor will they ever have any. He's better off just left alone because that's the way he likes it. The young woman looked saddened. I kind of feel sorry for him, to be honest. It must be lonely being that grumpy. Ethel just laughed and started ringing the young woman's purchases through the till. The snow was coming down heavier and heavier, and William was making his way back up the hill out of the village, back to his cottage on his small holding. He couldn't decide whether to be angry or annoyed or scared the fact that he couldn't remember something that he knew so well. Must be old age. I'm just getting to that stage in life, he admitted out loud. He then realised it was 4:10, and he must hurry in order to get the correct postcode, write it on the envelope, and walk back down to the edge of the village where the nearest post box was. Not quite as far, admittedly, as having to walk back to the shop, but far enough in the deepening snow. The cottage was chilly upon William's return. He hadn't lit the fire, as it would be a waste of firewood to have it burning while he wasn't there. Fingers numb from the cold, he quickly opened his desk drawer and rifled through long-forgotten pieces of paper to find his address book. His sister's postcode would be in the address book. Flicking with one hand and fumbling for his glasses with the other, eventually he pulled himself together and found the postcode. He scribbled it hurriedly on the envelope and let the door rattle close behind him as he stepped out once again. When the weather was more agreeable, William enjoyed the walk from the small holding down the hill to the village. It was a very peaceful and picturesque walk, especially in summer when the hedgerows were alive with flowers and bees and butterflies. And it gave him time to think and be alone, which was the thing he liked the best. Not so on this afternoon. The sky was now a leaden, dark, deep blue, and snowflakes had started to land on his eyelashes and created a fine coating over his jacket and hat. He could just make out the red of the post box through the snow as he approached the edge of the village. Fumbling in his pocket, he pulled out the letter and double-checked the postcode once again. As he lifted it to slip it into the slot in the post box, he heard a strange noise. Where the devil was that noise coming from? It was probably those children from earlier playing tricks on me. That was a common occurrence for Weird Willie, and it wouldn't have surprised him if the children were hiding in the bushes beside the postbox. He listened again to make sure his ears weren't playing tricks on him, and he heard the same noise again. Yes, definitely a scratching noise. And then he realised it was coming from inside the postbox. He turned around and looked for the sight of anyone, as he wasn't really sure what to do. The rest of the villagers had long gone inside and warmed themselves by the fire, and he was alone in the lane next to the postbox. He looked at his watch, which he'd had for at least about 20 years, battered, but still in perfect working order, and he realised that it was nearly 5 o'clock, the time when the postman would come and remove the mail from the postbox. So he decided he would stand and wait, even if the postman was late, which was probable because the village postman was always late. But he would wait, for what if it was a rat and it was eating the mail, or a family of mice that had decided to make a nest in the letters and Christmas cards? No, he would wait. He wasn't going to put his letter in that postbox for some rat to chew it up. He had plenty of experience with that at home in his small holding, and he certainly didn't want a Christmas card with teeth marks in it going to Celia, because that wouldn't please her at all. He only had to wait a few moments, and he shifted about from foot to foot to keep warm, and the postman approached in his van and pulled up. "Hiya there, Bill. Are you waiting for someone?" said the postie. William looked at him. "I'm not putting my letter in that postbox," he said. "Well, that's fine, Bill. I can take it for you. I'm here to collect the mail anyway," said the postman. William stared at him. "No, there's a reason I'm not putting my mail in the postbox." The postie gave him a puzzled look. "Whatever do you mean, Bill?" "There's something in there," said William. The postie continued to stare at him. Maybe he thought that William had horns growing out of his head. "Well, of course there's something in the postbox. It's called post. It's a week before Christmas. Obviously there's going to be something in the postbox." "No," said William. "Come here, come quick and listen." What a comical sight they must have been. A grumpy elderly gentleman and a young postman bent over the slot in the postbox. Within a few seconds, the noise started again. "There is something in there," said the postie. William said, "I told you. Do you think I was just making it up?" Hurriedly, the postie fumbled for his keys and flipped through them like a jailer to find the key to open the postbox. When he pulled it open, there was a sea of red and white and gold envelopes, and a few brown ones too. But nothing out of the ordinary, and certainly no family of mice came jumping out at them. "Oh," said William. The postie shrugged his shoulders and scooped up the mail into the sack. "Do you want me to take that card, Bill?" said the postie. William had almost forgot that was the reason he was there. He nodded and handed the card to the postie. And just as the postman pulled the last of the letters out of the postbox, there sat the source of the noise. A tiny Jack Russell puppy. Shivering, thin, dirty, and very, very frightened. The two men looked at each other. "What do we do now?" said the postie. "Well, I'm not taking anything to do with this," said William. The postie gave him another look. "I can't take this dog. We can't leave it here. He'll freeze to death. I have to get all these letters away and ready to post before the end of my shift. You'll have to take him, William. Even just keep him until the morning, until the snow passes. William felt rage build up inside. Why was it left to him to deal with something like this? This was nothing to do with him. All he wanted to do was post the blasted card for his sister and get home and get the fire lit and settle in for the evening. What's he going to do with a tiny little dog? The two round eyes stared up at him. The postman turned his back and lifted the last of letters into his post van. William sighed. Okay then, little one, I suppose you're going to have to come with me. He reached into the post box and lifted the shivering little shape. The puppy was an ugly little thing. None of the less. He opened his big jacket pocket and tucked the puppy in and turned round to walk away. The postie shouted after him, "Thanks, Bill." "I wish you'd stop calling me Bill. My name's William." On the walk back up to his house, as the snow fell heavier and heavier, William could feel the tiny body of the puppy in his pocket. The body shivered. No noise, just shivers. He quickened his pace. When his mother and father had been alive, they did keep a small handful of livestock on the small holding, and there was often a stray cat to help keep the other animals in check. So William was no stranger to looking after such things. At this stage in life, he had no inclination to have to deal with such a small and helpless creature, and thought it might be kinder, perhaps put the small thing out of its misery. This thought turned over in his head as he got back to the house. No one was going to miss the puppy. If they'd left it in a post box, nobody would even miss him. Once safely inside the confines of his cottage, William wrapped the puppy up in his jacket. It was probably too weak to go anywhere, so he didn't really worry about it disappearing. He went about his business, set the fire to warm the main room of the cottage up. There was a stove in the corner. While the fire in the stove was catching, William went about and organised a saucer with some water and started to prepare some food for himself. Tiny whimpers and squeaks emanated from underneath the jacket. "Will you be quiet, you little thing?" said William. But all the same he lifted the jacket up, and those two little eyes peered out at him. "I suppose you'll be weak and hungry as well." He didn't really like the idea of having to share his food with anyone. He had everything perfectly calculated so that he had enough food for himself over the winter in case he got snowed in and couldn't make it down to the village. The thought about getting rid of the puppy still circled in his mind. There was a chance that he could make it down to the village in the morning, and the first thing he would do is take the puppy straight to the nearest vet. They could deal with it. It's not for him to worry about. He had plenty of other business to be on with. He set the bowl of water down in front of the puppy and took the jacket from the top of him. The puppy continued to cry and didn't show any signs of wanting to move. "You need to drink the damn water, you stupid thing," said William to the puppy. "If you don't drink it, you're going to die." The whining continued and got louder and louder and louder. This high-pitched noise grated on William's brain, and he could feel himself starting to lose his temper. It then occurred to him that this puppy was very, very small and was probably taken away from its mother far too young. This puppy wouldn't know how to drink water and needed more sustenance. He switched the water out for milk from the fridge and prodded the puppy towards the bowl. "Come on, little one, you have to take this. You can't die on my watch because that postman knows I've got you." As those words came out of his mouth, he realised that he couldn't get rid of the puppy. It was an old-fashioned practice, but many years ago it was perfectly common for farmers and smallholders to drown bags of kittens simply because they couldn't cope with looking after them and they couldn't allow the population to grow. William had thought he would do the same with this puppy. If it hadn't been for the postman, he'd probably still have done it, but he knew deep down in his heart that he couldn't. He may have been a mean old man, but there was a heart in there somewhere. He poked the puppy again and the puppy continued to cry. "Right then, you little beggar, we're going to have to do this the hard way." William retrieved a small plastic syringe from a cupboard outside in the hallway. These syringes were often used to administer drugs to smaller animals, and he filled up the syringe with some milk, grabbed a hold of the puppy by the neck, which created another yelp, and shoved the syringe in the little thing's mouth and pressed the plunger. The puppy coughed, spluttered, and swallowed. The whining stopped. So William tried again, a little bit more gently this time, and the puppy started to swallow the milk. William continued this, sitting beside his fire, which was now glowing and warm, and repeated this process until the little puppy's tummy was round and full. I suppose I better call you something. I think I'll just call you Dog. The pup looked at him, but no noise came, and slowly he could see the little pup's eyes starting to close. William lifted the puppy gently and put him back inside his jacket and folded the jacket over the little dog, who was now absolutely fast asleep. Good God, I'm definitely getting soft in my old age. William wasn't saying this to anyone in particular, but felt that he had to voice it. Somebody might be listening somewhere, he never knew. Now that the wee thing was quiet, William could get on with what he actually needed to do. He made himself some supper, changed his clothes, and closed the house down for the night. He sat down in his chair beside the fire, looking at the little bundle wrapped up in his jacket. He made the decision there and then that first thing in the morning, he would make sure that the puppy had fed again, and he would go straight down to the village. That would be the first order of business before anything was done on the small holding. The weeding and the shovelling could wait. He started to think back about the animals that he'd had with his parents. They never had any dogs, it was always cats. And he didn't really know what to do with a dog anyway, and it wouldn't be of any use to him. He didn't like the idea of having something that resembled a pet. The stray cats that used to frequent the farm that his mother used to feed out the back porch were excellent at catching mice and keeping the rats down. But a dog? Dogs needed walked. Dogs wanted played with. No, that would not do. As these thoughts drifted through his mind, he himself drifted off, the fire crackling gently beside him. William opened his eyes, feeling the cold seeping into his stiff old bones. The fire had gone out. He sat up with a start and looked round. He never made it to bed, it was morning. He could see the light peeking through the cracks in the shutters of the cottage. He'd fallen asleep in the chair. All of a sudden, he remembered the puppy. Panicking, he looked around. Surely the little thing was mobile, either that or it was dead. And then he saw the jacket in exactly the same position that he'd tucked the pup in the night before. A strange feeling came over William. A slight sense of relief, a slight sense of dread. The little thing probably hadn't made it through the night. Cautiously, he stepped over to his jacket and lifted the corner of it up, expecting fully to find the puppy cold and motionless underneath. When he lifted it, two small, bright eyes looked up at him. He lifted him out. No longer shaking, the little dog's tail started to wag. "Well, if nothing else, you're a resilient little bugger, aren't you?" he said, lifting the dog over, and got the syringe out to repeat the process from the night before. The dog started to cry again, which William could absolutely not tolerate. "Shut up, you stupid little thing. I'll feed you. Just give me a minute." So he fed the dog again, and then realised at some point this dog would need to go to the bathroom. He went to the front porch and opened the door, and 5 feet of snow promptly fell in the door, almost on top of him and the dog. Damn it and blast! The snow had continued heavily through the night, and there now was no reasonable route for William to leave the house. His heart sank. It would take at least a day and a half to shovel his way out with the tiny shovel that he had inside the cottage. He would have to cut a path over to the nearest shed where his big shovel was, and then start digging. There was no way he was going to get to the village this morning with this puppy. Why me? Why do I always get left with all the stupid stuff that's nothing to do with me? I should have just left you in the post box. The little puppy, still tucked under his arm, wagged his tail. "Right, dog, I suppose we're going to have to make you go inside." William grabbed some newspaper from beside the fire and placed it on the floor and sat the puppy down. The puppy looked at him. Nothing was happening. "Well, you can just sit there until you're ready to do something," said William. He once again busied himself with the fire, every now and then glaring over at the dog to make sure that he hadn't moved and he hadn't gone anywhere. He did have a feeling that the puppy was still very, very weak, but he seemed bright enough and the little tail was wagging and there was no crying to be had. Over the course of the day, despite his best intentions to ignore Dog as much as possible, William did have a moral compass. I went back and checked on the pup frequently. He'd fashioned a bed out of an old piece of blanket and he sat it beside the fire, leaving a saucer of milk and scraps from his breakfast down beside, just in case the little dog decided to try and eat something. William set about putting his boots on and went back to the disaster that was the front porch. He took his little shovel and gingerly started the long process of trying to get to the outside shed. He went back to this periodically, stopping to rest in between bouts of shovelling and checking on Dog. At one point out the corner of his eye, he did notice that Dog was taking an interest in the milk in the bowl. And before long, little Dog was lapping up milk all by himself. William felt a strange sense of satisfaction out of this, but soon put it out of his mind and returned to his shovelling. Later on that afternoon, he'd made little headway, and Dog had come to investigate. Gaining a little strength, the youngster's curiosity seemed to be returning. "Now, Dog, you need to get out the way. I don't want you disappearing into the snow because I'll never find you again." He shoved Dog back with his foot as the little puppy tried to make his way out to the pathway that William had started to create. He turned round and started shovelling, and the puppy pounced forward again. "I told you, Dog, no." He shooed the dog back into the main room and shut the door, and returned once again to his task. Dog was having none of it. The little paw scratched at the door, exactly the same way as he'd done in the post box, and he started to cry. William ignored them and kept shovelling. Stupid dog. Can't have him out here, he'll freeze to death. The cries got louder and louder, and William thought his head was going to explode. He slammed open the door, sending the puppy hurling across the room. "Don't you dare! Sit there and be quiet!" he screamed at the dog. The puppy ran and hid under a chair and didn't make a sound. As the light started to fade in the afternoon, as is always the case with shorter days in the winter, William realised that he hadn't heard a sound from the puppy. Hanging up his shovel for the final time that day, he'd made it halfway to the shed. He straightened out his back and closed the porch door. Returning to the main room, where the fire was still going, the warmth started to thaw his frozen and tight fingers. There was no sign of Dog. Paying no heed, he turned to his little kitchen in the corner of the room and prepared some dinner. As smells started to unfurl out of the pot, Dog could sense that something tasty was happening and dared to peer out from under his little hiding place. The big scary man was still there, but that wasn't going to stop Dog. He sauntered out, still a bit unsteady on his feet, stretched, and ran over to where the big scary man was standing, because that's where the smell was coming from. He pawed at the counter, and in reply he got a swift kick up the backside that sent him almost back to the place he'd just come from. The big angry man was making those noises again, and he thought better of it, and observed from a safe distance. William sat and ate, and could feel the tiredness seeping into his bones. He was getting too old to be shovelling snow all day. He knew that already, and today had taken a lot out of him. After feeding himself, he once again put scraps on the plate, taking away the stale ones from the morning, and filled the little bowl back up with milk. Feeling a bit braver, Dog noticed this and decided to take the risk and made his way unsteadily across the floor to where the big scary man was. Big scary man was making the hot thing hot. Dog had noticed this the night before. He didn't like the flames, but the heat felt good and made him feel cosy and warm. As William knelt by the fire, stoking it up and adding some more coal, Dog came over and started drinking from the bowl. "Oh, so you're not stupid enough to starve yourself then? That's a good start," he said to the puppy. "You need to get your strength up because we've got a long walk down to the village as soon as we can get out of here." Dog paid no attention to him and lapped up the milk, which tasted good. He sniffed the stuff in the bowl next to it, but he didn't think he wanted anything to do with that. It looked complicated. Now that Dog seemed to be quite sufficient in feeding himself, William got up off his knees slowly and heaved himself into his chair. He would sit here and warm himself before shutting the house up once again for the night and trying again tomorrow with the snow. As he started to settle in and his eyelids started to get heavy, he felt something touching his trouser leg. Dog. The puppy sat at his feet and was pawing at his trouser leg. Once again, that same motion that he had done in the postbox and at the door earlier that day. "You're not going to leave me alone, are you?" he said to the dog. Dog looked at him and squeaked. William tried to ignore Dog and shut his eyes and pretend that he hadn't seen him and hadn't heard him. Dog was having none of it. He continued to paw at his trouser leg and whimper very, very slightly. Another sigh from William, and he lifted Dog up onto his lap. He knew that small puppies were often bundled up with their litter mates, and thought perhaps that Dog was feeling a little on the lonely side. "You can sit up here to get a heat, and then I'm putting you in your blanket." Dog proceeded to clamber all over William. William wasn't very happy about it and put the dog on the floor again. The whimpering started. After the third time, William gave up and lifted Dog into his lap. Little puppy wagged his tail and promptly squatted down and peed in his lap. "You dirty little beggar!" William once again hurled Dog across the floor and stood up, bellowing and shouting while he wriggled out of his damp trousers. Dog retreated to the blanket and hid his face away from the angry man. William decided enough was enough for one day and retreated to his bed. "We'll just have to try again in the morning and get out this blasted house." Morning dawned and more snow had fallen overnight, more or less undoing all of the work that William had done the previous day. All that shovelling for nothing. Meanwhile, nothing's getting done in the yard. William by nature was a difficult man to please, and he loved nothing more than having things to complain about. So this day was a bumper day for things to complain about. The weather forecast, chiming across the radio, informed William that heavy snow was set to continue and that many people should prepare for bad weather conditions. William already knew that he would be snowed in and it was going to be at least a few days, so did his best to prepare everything that he could, just in case. There was plenty of food in the larder. He knew he wouldn't starve. He was more concerned about Dog and what he was going to do with him. "Once this is over, you're going straight to a shelter, never mind the vets," he said to Dog. Over the course of the next 3 days, William began his shovelling quest once again. And all the while, Dog was getting stronger and stronger. William had fashioned several toys out of makeshift items just lying around the cottage in order to keep Dog amused so that he could continue with his shovelling mission. The little thing seemed to be quite happy and had also gotten the hint about not peeing on his trousers and had started using the newspaper that William had put down on the floor. By the third night, Dog's behaviour had returned to that of a normal, healthy puppy, much to the disgust of William. But in some small way, deep down, he was happy that the little dog was healthy. Dog had started following William everywhere. It was like having a shadow. And he also realised that with the shovelling, the snow, now a good 6 feet either side, the dog couldn't go anywhere, he couldn't escape. So he allowed the little pup to come and go out of the main room and follow him down the path as he shovelled his way towards the shed. For a small puppy, Dog was actually very well behaved. William just saw him as an inconvenience though, but one that could be handled for a few more days until a trip to the village was going to be possible. On the third evening of Dog's tenancy, he attempted once again to paw at the leg of William as he sat in his chair beside the fire. Not as harshly this time. Shooed the little puppy away. Dog got into his bed and settled down, but he was looking at the big angry man. The days of hard labour were taking a toll on a not-so-young William, and each night he found himself nodding off earlier and earlier in his chair. This particular evening, he had pulled over a small stool from the other side of the fire and had eaten his evening meal sitting in the soft chair beside the fire. He was able to sit his tea and his dinner plate on the stool and settle down for a quick snooze before getting ready for bed. He woke some time later as the temperature started to drop, as the fire died out, and he felt strangely warm. For a split second he thought that Dog had peed on his lap again, but when he looked down, the little tiny puppy that had been shivering in the postbox was curled up on his lap, fast asleep. If William hadn't been so tired and achy, he would have removed the dog and put it back on its blanket. Instead, he just closed his eyes. The day finally came where William had cleared a path from the cottage to the shed, and from the shed, with a much, much bigger shovel, down to the road at the gate of the property. The snowplough only came so far up the track, but the workers usually dug by hand a few feet more, and they had joined up with the hard work that William had done. He had a clear path out of the house, out of the property, and finally down to the village. This was probably the closest thing to excitement that William would experience in his life, being a stoic sort of character that didn't get excited about anything. He busied himself, outdoor clothes on, getting ready to take Dog. He'd had more than enough over the last few days and he didn't want to be responsible for such a small thing. Dog was getting stronger every day and had started to gnaw on small tidbits of food and drink lots of milk on his own. He could sense that something was going on this morning, as the big angry man was very, very animated and seemed to be bustling about a lot. Before he could get out of his blanket to investigate, he was scooped up and tucked inside the angry man's jacket. It was nice and warm in here, a bit like when he had been sleeping on his lap beside the fire the night before. But he didn't think he was going to sit beside the fire today. He started to shake a little, starting to feel scared, and not really sure what was going on, because the angry man hadn't really touched him an awful lot. William had realised that the puppy was too big to fit in his pocket, so jamming him inside his jacket was the only thing that he could do. And he started the walk down to the village. This would be wonderful. He could drop the puppy off and he could just get on with his life, because he had all these jobs to catch up on that hadn't been done because of the snow a few days before, and there was still a lot of shovelling to do as well. As he walked down, closer to the edge of the village, the children that had been playing out on the street the fateful night of the finding of the puppy were bundled up in hats and mittens, and they were building a snowman. Hey, mister! Hey, Mr. Bill! Hey, Willie, what have you got? What's that bump in your jacket? Said the smallest one with the snotty nose. None of your business, young man, William said to the small boy, who he thought really shouldn't have been outside on his own. You're a liar, Weird Willie. I can see something poking out of your jacket. What is it? An older boy came running over. He may well have been the smaller child's older brother. Hey, mister, have you got a puppy in there? It's nothing to do with you. It's none of your business. Why have you got a puppy? We want a puppy. Can we see the puppy? William turned his back protectively, on instinct. No, you cannot. Is this your puppy? The little one asked. No, he's not. I'm taking him down into the village. He's going to a shelter. The older boy said, We've always wanted a puppy. We could take him. I can go and ask Mum right now. You will do no such thing, young man, said William. You don't know if this dog's got anything wrong with it, and you can't just say to your mother that you've got a puppy and turn up on the doorstep with it. The two little boys started to protest and whine. Mind your own business, said William, and started to walk briskly along to the village. The two little boys trailed after him and tugged on his coat sleeves, trying to persuade the man to at least let them get a glimpse of the puppy. William relented eventually and showed the boys the tiny little face poking out of his jacket. And the two young boys stood in awe. I've never seen a puppy that small, said the youngest boy. That's amazing. We could put him in a box and run round with him and everything. Let's go and ask Mum if we can keep him. You are not having this puppy, William said. He turned away from the boys and continued to walk into the village. He'd realised he wasn't going to make it to a shelter any time soon. The roads were still blocked with snow and he hadn't dug out enough to get his car out. Even if he could get his car out, he would probably slide down the hill rather than drive. So his next option was to stop in at the vet's. The country vet's was a glorified living room attached to the private residence of the village vet. An older, jolly man, he had been the vet in the village for many, many years and was well known and well liked in the community. Despite William not partaking in the community, he had a certain kind of respect, as the vet had been just a young student in years gone by when his mother and father had kept livestock. And oftentimes, this vet, whose name was Arthur, would come and help them with animals in need. And that always seemed to happen in the middle of the night, which William had always found an inconvenience, even as a younger man. He knocked the door and stood and waited. And eventually, the round smiling face of Arthur opened the door. Bill! Strange to see you here. Is everything okay? William opened the top of his jacket and the little face of dog peeped out. Oh, have you been buying yourself a pet? William gave him a stare. Don't be ridiculous, Arthur. We found this creature in the post box a couple of days ago. I need rid of him. Arthur opened the door wider and invited William and dog into the front room that served as his veterinary surgery. Well, we better take a look at the little fella first of all and see what's happening with him. William plonked him out of his jacket onto the table and Arthur checked him over. He seems to be fit well and healthy. And what exactly are you planning on doing with this puppy? William looked at Arthur. What do you mean, what am I planning on doing with him? What are you planning on doing with him? Arthur started to laugh. What do you want me to do with him, William? I'm not a resource for waifs and strays, you know. I've got 3 sick dogs in the cages through the back already, and I certainly don't have time to look after this puppy. Well, I'm not keeping him, says William. Arthur smiled again. Well, you're going to have to keep him for another few days until the roads are clear. No one can get out at the end of the village. And I know what you're thinking is, you're going to take him to a shelter, aren't you? Of course I am. What else am I going to do with him? Well, you know, maybe a little bit of companionship would be good for you. Did you ever think about that, Bill? You must be pretty lonely up there every day. William shook his head. I am quite happy with my own company, thank you very much. Well, that's a shame, said Arthur. You've done a really good job of getting this little tyke up and going. And he's pretty thin, but he seems bright enough, and he definitely doesn't have anything worrying wrong with him. You are going to have to keep him for another few days, though. William sighed. What am I supposed to do with him? Just keep doing what you've been doing. We'll give him a little injection of some multivitamins, and I can give you some puppy food for him. Feed him twice a day. Make sure he's going to the toilet, and then once the snow's cleared, you can go on your merry way and you can take him to the shelter. This did not please William at all. Grudgingly, he took the puppy food, scooped Dog back up into his jacket, and turned tail to walk away. Bill? William swivelled round. What is it, Arthur? You need to pay me? I'm not paying you. If you'd done something with the bloody dog, then I might have paid you. Promptly, he turned back round and walked away. Arthur shook his head and shut the door behind him. William reluctantly took Dog home, the long walk back up the track to the cottage. He plonked the puppy food into the bowl, refilled the milk, and put some of the makeshift toys down in front of him. Looks like you're going to be here for another few days yet. Arthur closed the door of the main room and went back to shovelling his snow. Over the next few days, Dog grew stronger and stronger, and a little bigger, and him and the angry man settled into a strange sort of routine in their own funny way. Food in the morning, a chance to play in the snow, a little sleep, some milk, do some doggy business, sleep again. And this cycle went on for a few days. But every night, once the angry man was asleep, Dog made the hike up the man's trouser leg and onto his lap in front of the fire. William had set the radio to the local station so that he could get updates on the men clearing the snow. So at the first available opportunity, he could try and get the car down the hill. Now, dear listeners, I think you know how this story is going to end. Over the next few days, without knowing it, William got attached to Little Dog, and they became companions of sorts. Little Dog, he never made it to the shelter. So I'm now going to tell you about the incident that made William decide to keep Dog. A cold, brisk and crisp morning had settled down over William's small holding. The snow had not thawed, a little more had fallen, but the snowy maze from his door to the village was still accessible. He was running out of food and would have to go down to the shop. After a few incidents of chewed slippers, William had also realised that he couldn't leave Dog himself. On one occasion, Dog had left him a little present in one of his slippers too. So as he had done the day he had gone to see Arthur the vet, he scooped Dog up and popped him inside his jacket. At this point, Dog and William had been together for a week, counted some coins out into his wallet and grabbed a small shopping list that he'd made and headed out the door, Dog bouncing up and down as he walked at a brisk pace. He picked up the groceries that he needed from the nosy lady in the shop that always seemed to call him Bill. He didn't know what it was about people calling him Bill, but he didn't like it. And on his way back, once again, he encountered the children playing in the snow at the same spot as before. He'd deduced that they must stay in the house at the end of the track. Hey, Weird Willie, have you got your dog with you that's not actually your dog? The older of the two boys was out, and he was tinkering with a sledge. Can we go sledging down your hill, mister? No, you cannot. You stay off my property, you little toe rag. William kept on walking. The smaller of the two boys was standing on William's side of the road as he forged past. The little boy grabbed his shopping bag out of his hand and ran. You little so-and-so, you come back here with my shopping. William knew that there was no way he would catch the youngster, but that wasn't going to stop him trying. He broke out into a half jog, mindful of the fact that the pavements were still slippy, and tried to chase after the little boy. Come back here right now. I'm going to tell your mother. And as he ran, Dog bounced up and down inside his jacket and bounced out, hitting the pavement hard. Before William could even react, the older boy shot across the road, grabbed the puppy and ran. William's next reaction took him completely by surprise. Panic had set in. He spun round and pumped his legs as fast as he can after the older boy. The older boy ran into his garden, slammed the gate behind him and disappeared in behind the house. William, relying on muscle memory from his younger days, vaulted the gate as best he could. It didn't look pretty from an observer's point of view, but he made it over without falling. Still trying to run, he pursued the boy. When he rounded the back of the property, there was no sign of him. Out of breath, red and embarrassed, he hammered on the door of the house. "Open this door! Open this door!" he shouted. After a second or two, a middle-aged woman opened the door, panic on her face. William tried to get his words out. "Boys, dog, run away, shopping." The woman looked at him. "The boys? My boys?" "Yes, your dirty little boys. They've stolen my shopping and they've stolen my dog." The woman looked utterly horrified. "You're kidding, right?" "No, I am bloody not kidding. Do I look as if I'm kidding?" William's chest was heaving and it felt very, very tight. "I just thought the boys were playing in the garden," she said, hurriedly slipping on a coat. "Daniel, Billy," she started shouting, "come out here at once. You come out here right now." The two boys meekly slid out from behind a coal bunker. "Yes, Mum." William was relieved to see that his shopping bag was intact. He then realised that dog was also intact as well, and a wave of relief swept over him. "What were you two young boys thinking about? Imagine pestering an old man like this, and what do you think you were doing trying to steal a dog? Your father and I have told you before, you're not getting a dog." The little boy stared at the ground and reluctantly gave Weird Willie back his shopping and his dog. "I am so terribly sorry," the mother said to William. "My boys know better than to behave like this. I am so sorry. Can I do anything for you? And are you okay? Do you want to come in for a cup of tea?" William shook his head, still really trying to catch his breath. He snatched dog and wedged him back into his coat and snatched the shopping bag off the smallest boy. "You need to learn to control your children." He turned round and stormed away, back to the gate that he had so athletically leapt over earlier. He definitely wouldn't be leaping back over it now. And it was on this walk home that William realised he still hated people. He thought they were an inconvenience and he didn't need them. But the panic and fear that had set in and tightened his chest when the small dog had been taken from him was a feeling he hadn't felt for a long, long time. And he realised then that having dog, the puppy in the postbox, might be just slightly better than having no company at all.